And after that, bishop to c4, the Italian bishop eyeing the f7 square, which is always a weak point in black camp. And after that, knight to f6. Dubov goes for the two knights defense, attacking the e4 pawn and not letting white to get too comfortable. And since this pawn is attacked, so that's why Sindarov defends it by the move d3. And now you can see white is threatening the move like knight to g5, piling up on the f7 square. And as you can see, this bishop on c4 is already bearing down. So to tackle all of this, simply bishop to e7, and Dubov is now preparing to castle, getting out from any threat. And after that, both sides Sindarov just castles d6, strengthening the pawn structure as well as opening the diagonal of this light square bishop. And after that, a4. And you can see here Sindarov just goes aggressive. He wants to gain some space on the queen side. But bishop to e6, Dubov asking for bishop exchange, and Sindarov just accepted f takes e6. And yes, now you can see black pawn structure is a big weekend on the king side, but he also gets the open f file for potential counterplay. Okay, so c3. And here Sindarov prepares to expand on the queen side. I mean, look at this. The move b4 and then b5 are coming, and also this queen can swing to b3, which can target e6 and b7 pawn. Okay, so here Sindarov goes for rook to e1. He simply brings the rook on the e file. And guys, now how can black continue this game? Here the best move for black is to push d5, trying to get rid of this double pawn structure. Obviously, you can see white cannot capture on d5 because that would actually improve black pawn structure. So let's suppose if he decides to develop another knight on d2, now comes d4, attacking the pawn, and if takes, bishop takes b4, d takes e5, and now simply knight to g4, targeting the pawn on f2. I mean, if he tries to attack this knight by, let's suppose, h3, now comes this amazing sacrifice, knight takes h2. The idea is after king takes f2, now comes queen to d4 check, attacking the king as well as the rook. And after this, king goes back to f1. And I know some of you wants to capture this rook, but guys, before that, bishop to c5, threatening mate on f2. So to stop this, rook to e3 is forced so that he can, block this diagonal. And after that, queen takes e3. Okay, threatening mate in 1 again. So queen to e1 is forced, but queen to g1 check, king to e2, queen takes g2 check, king to d1. And guys, now I just want you all to pause the video and try to guess the next move which black can play in this position. And guys, the move is to sacrifice the rook by rook takes f3. The idea is after knight takes f3, yes, you are right, queen takes f3 check, queen to e2, queen to h1 check, queen to e1, queen takes h3. And now just take a look at this position. I mean, now black is targeting the pawn on d3, and the knight on c6 is ready to jump on this square. And also look at this bishop. I mean, these amazing coordination is enough to destroy the white king. Okay, so in the game after rook to e1, yep, so basically in this position, here Dubov plays h6, stopping any ideas of bishop to g5 or knight to g5. Okay, so now Sindarov develops his another knight on d2, and basically he's preparing for maybe knight to f1 and then to g3. Okay, so queen to e8, and basically this queen is now heading to either g6 or f7 to put pressure on white king side. And after that, Sindarov reroutes his knight on f1, queen to f7. And you can see the queen settles on f7, and now black is ready to push d5 pawn break. But before that, h3, preparing for knight to h2, and you can see d5 is still a threat, but knight to d7. Basically, Dubov reroutes his knight to d7, opening the f file. Basically now you can see this amazing battery of this rook and the queen, which is eyeing on the king side. And finally, knight to h2. And after that, Dubov strikes in the center with the move d5. And as I said, white cannot capture on d5 because this will improve the pawn structure of black. So that's why here Sindarov goes for bishop to d2. He calmly develops the bishop, connecting the rooks and defending against any tactics. Okay, so Dubov develops his bishop to a more active square, aiming at the white king side. Okay, knight to g4. And guys, that's a very clever move by Sindarov. Basically, he is setting a trap. I mean, let's suppose if black is not careful and he goes for any move like, let's suppose b5, so that he can, open up the queen side. But guys, now comes this amazing move. Can you find the move? And guys, the move is to sacrifice the bishop by bishop takes h6. Yes, you are right. The idea is after g takes h6, knight takes h6, and you can see black has to lose his queen. So that's why after knight to g4, here Dubov finds the best move. He simply slides the king to h8, avoiding any tricks on the g file. So queen to c2 by Sindarov. Maybe he is planning to, put pressure on the c file or to support the central pawn push. Okay, so here Dubov goes for queen to g6, and guys, that's a good move. And basically he is setting up a trap. I mean, if white is now not careful and he decides to attack the center by, let's suppose, c4, and now just pause the video and try to guess the next move which black can play in this position. And guys, the move is to sacrifice the rook by rook takes f3. But why? The idea is after removing the knight, you can see now this knight can jump on to d4 square, attacking the queen and the rook. And after this queen goes back, simply knight takes e2 check, queen takes e2, h5, taking benefit of this pinned knight. Okay, and if now white decides to slide the king, just takes, and you can see no need to tell that who is winning. Okay, so in the game after queen to g6, so that's why after seeing all of this complication, Sindarov plays king to h1, which is a very cool defensive move. He sidesteps the threat on g2, and guys here even so basically now knight to e1 is also possible, because in the next move Dubov, however, decides to sack the rook on f3 by rook takes f3. And basically his idea is to destroy the pawn structure of white king. I mean, after takes, rook to f8, targeting the weak pawns of white. And now to defend this position, here white can consider the move rook to g1, trying to create a discover attack on the queen, and I mean getting the black pieces into back foot. And let's suppose if rook takes f3, now comes rook to e3, trying to attack this active rook. And if black decides to exchange, just takes, queen to h5, targeting this weak h3 pawn, but rook to g3. And you can see here white successfully neutralized all of the black's attack. But in the game after the move, so basically let me go back. So in the game after rook to f8, here basically Sindarov goes for knight to h2. And guys, that's a mistake. I mean, yes, he wants to play rook to g1 so that he can attack the queen, but the problem with that move is now Dubov goes for queen to h5. He targets the weak pawns of white, and now queen to d1, and basically Sindarov tries to bring the queen to defend. So basically he wants to put this queen on this g1 square, but queen takes h3. And guys, again, white must consider the move queen to f1 so that he can exchange the active queen of black. But instead he goes for rook to e1. He still wants to play rook to g1. But guys, now I just want you all to pause the video and try to guess the next move which black can play in this position. And guys, in this position, black can actually sacrifice his knight by knight to d4. And yeah, I know some of you might be like, bro, what kind of move is this? But guys, this move has a clear idea behind it. The main idea is after white captures the knight, e takes d4, and you can see black is now successful in opening the diagonal of this dark square bishop so that he can mate the white king on h2. And now let's suppose if to defend this, he pushed e5, just takes. If f4, now what's next? And guys, now in this position, black can go for this another beautiful sacrifice, rook takes f4. And here the best move for white is to capture this bishop. I mean, because if he decides to capture this rook by bishop takes f4, now bishop takes f4, threatening mate on h2, which is unstoppable. I mean, to stop this, if he decides to slide the king, just bishop takes h2 check, king to h1, bishop to g3 check, king to g1, queen to h2 check, king to f1, and yes, you are right, queen takes f2, and that's a mate. But in the actual game, after rook to e1, yep, let me go back. Here's Dubov goes for d4. Basically, he's going for the same idea of takes, so that he can open the diagonal of this dark square bishop, which I mentioned earlier. Okay, but b5. And Sindarov tries to create some counterplay on the queen side, but now it's too late. I mean, he just takes on b5, a takes b5, and now black can just capture on c3 and then, go for knight to d4, which simply centralizing the knight, which will be a perfect outpost for it. But instead he he decides to bring the knight back on e7, which is a mistake because he just undevelops his active knight. And finally Sindarov finds a defensive resource, which is rook to g1, and you can see now rook to g3 is coming. And guys, here Sindarov goes for queen to e2. And guys, that's a mistake. And basically, he wants to defend, but guys, moving the queen off the d file allows black to open the center fully. And without wasting any time, Dubov just decides to capture on c3, bishop takes c3, and now knight to g6. And you can see knight to f4 is coming. But queen to e3, another mistake. Instead, he must consider the move queen to c2 so that he can go for bishop to b4, creating some pressure over the knight. Or we can say trying to open the c file. But knight to f4. Finally, this knight lands on d4. And guys, now you can see since the pressure on g7 is immense, so black can now consider the move bishop to f5 so that he can block the queen's diagonal. But here Dubov finds a move even more interesting. I mean, in this position, he sacrifices the knight by knight to g6. And guys, what a move. The idea is, if now white captured the knight by rook takes g6, now you can see this is just mate. So that's why after knight to g6, simply e5 by Sindarov. He tries to block the bishop, but bishop takes e5. And after queen to g4, asking for queen exchange, and Dubov just happily exchanges the queen. Bishop takes h2 and simplifying the game so that he can get into the endgame, which is completely winning for black. Knight to e5, and since this knight is targeting the rook on g4, and if it moves, then simply knight takes f3 fork. So yeah, so basically now rook takes g7. He grabs a pawn, but now it's hopeless because of knight takes f3, rook to e7. He targets the pawn on e6, but bishop to b4, f4. Basically, Dubov brings the bishop back into the game, and now white must consider the move rook to g7 so that he can double the rook and generate some counterplay. But instead, he goes for and now knight to g5. Here, Dubov just simply shut off the g file so that this rook can't enter on g7. And guys, in this position, Javokhir Sindarov resigned because let's suppose if the game continues like rook to a8 check, king to g7, rook at d goes to d8 so that he can give another check, but rook to f5, targeting this isolated b5 pawn. And if he now gives a check, just king to f6, rook to a1, rook takes b5. And now just take a look at this structure. I mean, really now just take a look at this connected pieces of black. And guys, what a masterclass by Danil Dubov. I mean, defeating the candidate 2026 champion who doesn't even lose a single game against Hikaru, Caruana and Prug. Absolute monster. And he defeats him in, just a cruel way. That's absolutely brilliant. Like this video and I will see you in the next one. This is your host Bison signing off. Bye bye.